we're here for the main reason of this video, which is frost blankets, which is the main way that market gardeners and farmers can protect their crops, especially in rows or in beds. Now in this video, we're going to talk about the 3 weight sizes that Bootstrap Farmer has, which is a 1.5 ounce, a 2 ounce, and a 4 ounce frost blanket. So the lightest frost blanket that we have is 1.5 ounces. It's typically used during the late spring or early fall when the risk of frost is minimal. It allows for maximum sunlight and water to pass through while still giving a few degrees of protection. It's also useful for pest control during the growing season.
The next size blanket that we have is a 2.5 ounce. This medium weight cover offers more frost protection, typically up to 4 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit, making it suitable for early spring and late fall. It still allows for good light and water penetration, but offers better insulation than the lighter weight blanket.
So our 4 ounce frost blanket is our heavy duty cover, which provides the most frost protection, often 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It's typically used in the dead of winter or in regions with particularly harsh winters. While it allows less light and water to reach the plants, its superior insulation properties can protect crops from severe cold and damage. And I want to point out that when we talk about 8 to 10 degrees or 4 to 6 degrees of frost protection, all of this has a lot of variability with the winds, how cold it's going to be, how clear the sky is, how much humidity is in the air, and you have to take that into account with the crop selection that you have and what the minimum weather protection may need to be. So a lot of people may just use this out in the middle of the field, and some people will add this inside of a hoop house for additional protection. So the next thing to consider now that we know the weights is thinking about layering them in an order that makes sense. So I would like to always see everybody, if you're going to use a layered system, to use a 1.5 ounce frost blanket first, and then covering with another 1.5 or a 2.5 or a 4 ounce, depending on, again, crop selection, terrain, variety, what your expected weather patterns are. And that way, overnight, when the temperatures drop, those layers are helping to insulate that bottom 1.5 ounce blanket. That's keeping that air mass in between that and the plant a little bit buffered, and then in turn, additionally adding to the insulation of the mulch or the heated soil throughout the day. And then as the sun comes up, you can take off that first layer of, again, 4, 2.5, or 1.5 ounce frost blanket, and just use the 1.5 ounce blanket, the first layer, either throughout the day, or you can even remove that if the conditions improve over the course of the day. So to give you an idea of what that looks like throughout the day and the evening when we're talking about light penetration, we're now going to go out into the field and get a real life example of these frost blankets and how much sun they block and what the differences are, and then what it looks like when they're layered up. So head with us out to the field. All right, so now we're outside for some real world tests. So what we're going to show is the difference between full sun, 1.5 ounce frost blanket, 2.5 ounce frost blanket, and 4 ounce frost blanket. And then we will demonstrate different light situations that happen whenever you're using a double layer. In this, we have a 4 ounce over the 1.5, the 2.5, and the 4 ounce. So let's take a look and see how much light we cut out. All right, so what I want to show you is this is the sun directly hitting this leaf tissue. This panel is 1.5 inch frost blanket, so you can see how much light is getting through. If I slide the panel over to the next one, we're looking at a 2.5 ounce, so it's a little darker, and then the 4 ounce is darker still. So now I'll reverse it. So that's a 4 ounce, a 2.5 ounce, a 1.5 ounce, and then no shade. So if we're going to put a single layer up and leave the frost blanket on during the day, that's what you can expect. So you're cutting down your available light. You are shading it if need be, but in more extreme climates and you're using thicker blankets, you could get darker and darker. So in the morning time, once the threat of frost comes up, you would come, remove the frost blanket, and use all available light. And now we're going to show you what happens whenever we start doing multiple layers. Now we see the leaf with a 1.5 and a 4 ounce. So if I remove the 4 ounce, it lightens up. And then if we remove the frost blanket altogether, that's direct sun. So again, we'll drop it down. That's a 1.5. And then we're going to cover it up for the night. And in the morning, you take off the 4-ounce blanket, and just the 1.5 is letting the light through so the plant can warm up. For a second stage of protection, we're going to use a 2.5 ounce and then layer with a 4 ounce. In the morning, you would take off the 4 ounce and have that extra frost blanket protection of a 2.5 ounce. And for further protection, we'll use 2 4 ounces. That's with the top layer of 4 ounce removed. And if we move them all out of the way, you can see the difference of how much sunlight actually gets through. So we're back to a 1.5, 2.5, and then a 4, and then a double layer of 4, a layer of 4, and a layer of 2.5 ounce. We'll remove the 4 ounce. And then we're going to go down to a 1.5 ounce and a 4 ounce on top. And there it is again with the 4 ounce removed. All right, now that we're back from the field, I'm sure a lot of you are curious. Our frost blankets are made from polypropylene, which is the same type of plastic that our trays are made out of. So it is a food safe, non-leaching material, BPA free. As you can see in these pictures, there is little tiny holes that let the water and let the light pass through while still constricting the wind and giving you the frost protection.